to look at food um, concepts before we get too deep into the details. And I welcome your questions. I will sort of keep an eye on the chat, and but more likely get to it at the end. I'm not going to try to talk right through to the last possible second, because I want this to be us, as that word intimate means a lot to me too. I want us all to have a chance to be able to interact as much as necessary. For you newbies out there, I'm sure a lot of this information will be, wow, never even considered, really helps a lot. And for some of you who've been at this for quite a while, I'm really hopeful that you will pick up some pointers and have some new insights tonight, and I hope you'll let me know. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Um, and I welcome you all to make yourself at home, have a drink. I certainly will. We'll pretend we're in our own living rooms. It takes all the pressure off of me. I don't know about anybody else, but my biggest fear in life was public speaking. So to end up as a public speaker is sort of a cosmic joke, I would think. But I had two other big fears. One was backflip, and I ended up being a trampoline instructor for 5 years, coached national champions. I performed plenty of double backflips myself. And the third fear of my life was swimming. And I ended up actually as a champion swimmer and swam at college even. So go figure. Anybody tells me they can't go raw, I don't believe them. I just don't believe them. Anybody can do it. But it helps to have some information at your hand. One of the questions I hear a lot of raw food presenters talk about the fact that none of the fruit we eat is ripe. And I think, gosh, I think the food I eat is ripe. I don't know about you. You figure the food you eat is ripe? I think the food I eat is ripe. But I've actually heard a raw food presenter, we won't name names, but he said from the stage that raw fruit, when you eat fruit, it robs your body of nutrients because unripe fruit hasn't set all of the nutrients, all the minerals aren't into the fruit yet. And so when you eat it, in its effort to survive, the fruit will pull minerals from your body. Well, there's so much wrong with that concept that I almost don't know where to start, but I'm pretty sure that when I eat an apple, it doesn't try to survive once I've chewed it up. I think it's down to its component parts pretty quickly. And gosh forbid, could you imagine if it did manage to recombine itself and survive and turn into an apple again? I mean, that would be terrible, man. Passing that apple would just be horrible. What do you think, Bri? That would be bad, wouldn't it? If it recombined. So, but he also said that none of the fruit we eat is ripe. And I don't think that's true. And he also said that fruit doesn't set its minerals until the end of the ripening process. And that's not true either. Fruit sets its minerals right early on. It's the carbohydrate shift that is the difference between ripe and unripe fruit, not the uptake of minerals. So he's wrong on many counts. The important part for us is that certain foods ripen by converting simple sugars, such as glucose and fructose, into complex sugars that we eventually call glycogen. When it's in a plant, we call it starch. When it's in an animal, we call it glycogen, just to be precise. But the complex sugars in our body, we store them as glycogen, even when they were starch from a plant. Now the foods that convert sugars into starches are typically not the foods that we tend to eat. Although if we eat them, we might eat them in a very premature, what you would almost consider unripe stage. They're ripe enough for us to eat, but not ripe enough to have finished their own ripening process. So beans and peas and corn and squashes and things of that sort um, are sweeter when they're young, and they become more starchy as they mature. Because starchy foods have no taste and we have no enzymes to break down the starches, or hardly any. And for certain types of starch, we have no enzymes whatsoever to break them down. We really can't digest them and don't tend to eat any of them raw. In fact, many of them are deadly if eaten raw, certainly many of the legumes, unless you soak them or in some way try to get rid of the toxins within them. So it's a pretty good message from nature that they're not our primary fare. But then we get into a whole world of, okay, well, we're fruit eaters, folks. We're going to eat a lot of fruit. And although a lot of people could be very, very happy with apples, pears, oranges, or apples, pears, citrus, berries, bananas, and probably get through a year on apples, pears, citrus, berries, and bananas, a tremendous number of fruit eaters want to try other fruit. And I don't blame them. There's 200 different fruits readily available to most of us most of the time, or certainly throughout the course of the year. and on top of that, there are hundreds and hundreds of varieties. You could eat a dozen kinds of apples, a dozen kinds of grapes, a dozen kinds of citrus without really putting much effort into it. And yet, okay, I lived in South Florida. Back when I lived in South Florida, there were citrus trees in South Florida before the state of Florida made everybody cut their citrus trees down. 4 million citrus trees, backyard citrus trees, got cut down on a disease threat. You can look into it if you want. But there was citrus, and I had access to tons of citrus. But I never ate citrus before the first cold snap, which usually came around the beginning of December. Because until then, the sugars hadn't yet set, is the word we use, into the citrus. And so, yes, you could get a hold of grapefruit in November, but it didn't taste very good. And by the beginning of December, it tasted great. And or the honey bells, or some of the other relatively early citrus that came, the nardicots, they get sweeter. And you'll notice in your own experience that citrus gets sweeter as you go into January and February and March, and then you start losing it again. So we could, if we wish, certainly consider ripeness, even as compared to edible, that when the fruits are at their peak of flavor for us, when they feel best to us, is what we consider, well, then it's ripe. Now, I talk to a lot of people about bananas because it's a fruit that has a huge, long ripening stage. But it doesn't stay in any one stage for very long. How long it stays at a particular stage of ripeness is called a window. And how long is that window? So there are many, many fruits. There's one called a Florida cherry, or a cerumen, not a cerumen, but a Florida cherry. It has a Ceylon cherry, I believe it's also called. There are several different names for it depending on where you live. And it tastes fantastic. And if you pick it at the peak of ripeness, it's only going to be edible even for a few hours. And then it's pretty much past its prime. I picked fruit off my property in Costa Rica, and I was very excited to bring it home to friends. And I only had a 3-mile walk, and I carried one in each hand by the stem so that I wouldn't damage the darn thing. And by the time I'd gone 3 miles, already the fruit was getting to where it wasn't the primo fruit that I had picked a couple hours earlier. So some fruit has a very, very short window, as opposed to a persimmon, which has like the longest window in the world. So I always ask people to describe to me how they eat their bananas, because most people don't know, or they judge their ripeness of their banana by the amount of spots. It doesn't have any spots. It's got green tips. It's got no green on the tips. It's all yellow. It's got lots of spots. And to me, all of that is meaningless. I don't judge a peach by how many spots it's got on it. I don't judge a mango by how many spots. I don't judge an avocado by its spots. I mean, you judge a leopard by its spots, but not fruit. The spottiness tells you something, but it really doesn't tell you about ripeness. What you do with a peach or a mango or an avocado is you feel it and you gently apply a little bit of pressure with the pad of your finger. And if you feel give, then you know. If you don't feel give, or you don't feel the appropriate give, then you know it's not ready. And this tells you a lot about fruit. I judge bananas by give. So you feel the banana. If it's got give, then it's ready to eat. If it doesn't give, there's no way. It's just not ready. Not ready in a banana means that there are medium chain triglycerides for which we have no digestive enzymes whatsoever. They're called oligosaccharides. And if you can't digest them, you're going to have problem with them of some kind, depending on your constitution, whether that means you're going to start burping, you're going to get a big tummy, you're going to get constipation, you're going to feel full for a really long time, an inappropriately long time, because your body's struggling to even handle the food. Something wrong is going to happen. And we are not designed to eat oligosaccharides. So I judge the banana. Is it ripe? By give. You judge a melon. Is it ripe? You check for give. But the give is going to be where? At the stem end. You feel it at the stem end and go, oh, does it give? If it doesn't give, it's not going to be ripe on the inside. I see a lot of people pick a leaf off of a pineapple to see if it's ripe. And that's not how you tell the ripeness of a pineapple. You tell when you pull the leaf, if it comes off easily, that means that the pineapple was picked a long time ago. It doesn't mean that the pineapple is ripe. It's not fair to do it that way. In fact, when we talk about ripeness, we also want to know, do things continue to ripen after you eat them? I'm sorry, after you pick them. Excuse me. Do things continue to ripen after you pick them, or do they not? Everybody knows, like you buy avocados, they're rock hard. Then they ripen, they soften, they've got give, you eat them. You buy persimmon, they're rock hard. You bring them home, you wait a week or two, they come ripe, they soften. But many foods won't do that. And I'm not going to give you a list right now, but I'm going to tell you, if you are interested in such a thing, there are many sites. You can just go to a website and look and say, which fruits ripen, which fruits don't. Once they're picked, it's good to be familiar. You guys are the fruit experts. It's stuff you want to know. And it's an easy list to look up, and it'll be more meaningful, more memorable, and more applicable if you just go look at the list. But some things definitely don't. It doesn't mean you can't sit there on your shelf for a while and wait pretty well, but you're not waiting for them to get riper, because it's not really going to happen. It makes a difference to the gardener. The gardener needs to know what has to ripen on the vine or the tree and what could be picked early, because it will continue to ripen. And I think this is a big concept to understand. Anybody who's ever opened up a jackfruit too soon, thinking they just couldn't wait anymore, and then realized, oh, nope, it wasn't ripe. Well, unripe jackfruit is not a joy to eat. There's a fantastic amount of latex. Latex is a powerful skin irritant, and it's sticky as all heck. It's not a joy to eat. Until the jackfruit's super ripe, it doesn't come free from its encasement. And when it is super ripe, you can just touch it with a blade and the whole thing will open up and all the fruit's readily available. So I have had jackfruit that were perfectly ripe and incredibly easy to eat, which is a joy in and of itself if you've ever worked against a jackfruit and tried to fight your way through. So, but what you also find out is that once you cut that jackfruit, it's not going to continue to ripen. You can't like close it back again. As far as I know, maybe you could close it and tape it and glue it and seal it with wax or something, and you could get a little more ripening out of it. I've never tried that, but you can't just put it over on the side and say, okay, this has to wait a while longer and it's going to come. Not going to happen. The national fruit of Jamaica is the ackee. And the ackee is one of my favorite fruits. But if you eat ackee before it's ripe, you die, and there's no known antidote. And pretty much in Jamaica, an average of 1 or 2 people a year die from eating unripe ackee, just forcing the issue because they just couldn't wait anymore. And oddly enough, when an ackee is fully ripe, it opens up itself. The shell itself opens. It exposes the fruit that's inside the shell to daylight and sunlight. And ultraviolet light completely negates the toxicity within the plant. It turns it off. And so if you just leave your fruit open in the daylight for a few hours, at that point, you have fruit that's completely safe to eat, even if it's not just a little bit spooky. But the taste is well worth it, and the feeling and the sensation of the ackee is well worth it. And we can go ripe after fruit after fruit after fruit, talking about how long can you leave it.
Okay, sorry we missed Dr. Graham. We'll wait until he connects in. So if you have any questions, I see some of the questions are posted in the chat. That's good. Yes, he will answer them as soon as he has a moment. And just curious, guys, how have you been? Sylvie, are you still raw?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah? How does
Yeah.
it feel?
Oh, it feels so good. Yes. Yeah. When I I'm too cold, I need to drink hot water all the time because now it's getting very snowy around here, very cold. So I need ginger. I need hot water all the time. I always have hot water everywhere in my room, in my in the living room. I have hot water and a heater to keep it warm. So yeah, I tried recently some raw pizza, and it was wonderful. And also, I want to try a raw paella. Paella, you know, paella, because I used to love paella. I was going to Montreal with my dad to eat that when I wasn't raw. And now yesterday I put some rice in the water. I will try with rice, raw rice. I don't know what it's going, but I'm experiencing different things. So I can do it with cauliflower, of course, easier, but I would like to try with raw rice. So 3 days in the fridge, or maybe sprouted rice. Maybe Brian could help me how to do the sprouted rice. I've never done it before.
Rutabaga actually feels like rice. I do sushi with rutabaga.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I feel the same. I drink hot tea in the morning with
Yeah.
ginger and lime or lemon. Tastes
Yeah.
great. Yes.
Oh, good.
Warms up and it's cold, but there's no way I am switching to cooked because it's cold.
Yes, 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 yes. But I was missing you. I thought that last time we saw each other, you were renovating something outside or your house. So I said, oh, it's a long renovation. We don't have
Yeah.
any news from Larissa.
I'm
Yeah.
still in the process. So
Yeah, that's what
I
I
feel
thought.
like we need to catch up, and I
Yeah.
got a lot of people. I appreciate all the people reaching out and
Yeah.
asking those questions, kind of setting me up for, and we sign up for a year. I know you sign up for a year, so
Yeah.
we should definitely keep going. Anybody else can tell your experience in the cold? I know I'm not gonna ask Brian because he is looking like he's hot. Anybody else has experience with cold weather and food?
Yeah, yeah, I'm Rachel. I'm from the UK. And yeah, hi everyone. I've been raw for quite a few years, and I noticed the first few years I really struggled with the cold. I used to use hot water, heaters on, layers on. But I've actually noticed the last 3 or 4 years my body temperature is regulated, and I don't feel the cold like I did all the time. I don't need the hot water. I'm not averse to drinking hot water with a bit of lemon in it or something periodically, but I don't do it for the need to keep warm. So it's quite interesting how your body changes over time. And we've just got the weather here has got quite seasonally cold. We've been very blessed with the weather in the UK so this summer, but it has gone cold here, so I am envious of everybody who's out in the tropics or warmer weather. I can't hear you, Larissa.
I'm saying that's good news, and I guess a couple of years we will have not have this problem. All right, Dr. Beck. Dr. Graham is back.
Just in case you thought everything had gone wrong today, it hadn't yet all gone wrong until then.
All right.
Okay, we got it solved. Rosie saved the day. Rosie saved. Okay, so I'm on my way. I was on a roll here. Thank you all for waiting. Oh man, I won't even bore you with the details. So these issues, I think these issues of ripeness are huge because the enjoyment of the food hinges on the ripeness of the food. If it's not a pleasure, and And when it's really good, it's memorably good. In 1999, I did a health and fitness week in California at Half Moon Bay in California. And I went to, I was trying to access fruit there. I didn't know where I was going to go. And I asked around and somebody said, oh, you can go to this guy. And I went to this guy and he had a barn, just a huge barn. And I said, I'm told you have fruit. And he goes, yeah, come with me. And he took me to the barn and we opened up the barn doors and it was filled with melon. I'd never seen anything like it. It was beautiful. It was just beautiful. He goes, how many do you want? I go, I don't want that many. Maybe like, I was thinking 20. And I said, 60? Because he had thousands and thousands. So I said, 60? And the next day we started eating the melon. Well, I wish I'd bought 100 of them. You could eat it until the skin was paper thin. And it was good right to the skin. I don't know. Nobody tried eating the skin, but maybe it was good too. It was so good. Anybody who was there was 13 people, and anybody there would remember those melons. In fact, every once in a while, I'll meet somebody who comes back and goes, remember those melons we had at Half Moon Bay at the Health and Fitness Week back then? So when it's really ripe, when it's that phenomenal, you remember it. As you should. You want to remember all the experiences of your life. A lot of people say, oh, I don't want to remember, and I go, no. You don't want to live in the old experiences, but you want to remember. That's how you learn. And you want to remember the good stuff because, what else is there in life? Remembering all that good stuff and all the great stuff that's yet to come. So ripeness to me is a huge factor. It's a critical point, but so is a little terminology by which a lot of people get confused. I see a lot of people get confused because they'll come to me and they'll go, well, this person says they're a fruitarian, and this person says they only eat fruit, and this person says, and you say, and and you say you eat half fruits and half vegetables, and how can all that be? And it's so different, and aren't we based as fruitarians? And so I like to make the distinction and be clear about the distinction, that in order not to confuse people, I talk about fruit the way most people talk about fruit, not the way a scientist might talk about fruit, not the way a botanist. There can't be that many botanists compared to the total number of people in the world. But there's a lot of people, and most people, if they eat a cucumber, they're having it in a vegetable salad and they consider it a vegetable. If they're eating okra or eggplant or pepper or tomato or zucchini, they're eating it with vegetables and they consider it a vegetable. Now, I know botanically, by definition, those 6 plants count as fruits. And in a world of talking about food combining or talking with people who know a bunch about fruit, we might call them fruity vegetables or vegetably fruits. I don't know. But only to a botanist would they truly be fruit. Well, only to a botanist or a person who wants to say they live on fruit. If a person wants to say they live on fruit, then a tomato counts as fruit. But by any other standard, a tomato is a vegetable. And so I will differentiate between what I would call the way you use it in the kitchen, where it's a vegetable, okra, pepper, eggplant, zucchini, the various squashes, cucumber, tomato. The way we use it in the kitchen is known as culinary or culinary, depending on where you're from. And the way we define it in a textbook might be botany. And so the point where people get confused, which I'm trying to eliminate by making the distinction, is when people flip-flop back and forth between calling a tomato a fruit and calling a tomato a vegetable, saying they eat all fruit, and then, all right, and then people get confused. So just as a matter of trying to eliminate confusion, I will always use culinary terms unless I tell you I'm doing otherwise. Now, there's a kind of a fruit that's called a multiple fruit, like a blackberry is technically many little fruits that are stuck together. It's not one fruit. And you could say, well, it's not a fruit. No, it's not. It's many fruit. There's a difference, but it is fruit. So some people say, you know, like a pineapple is a multiple fruit, but it grows oddly. I mean, it's an air plant by bromeliad by definition. There aren't a lot of bromeliad fruits. So it's just sort of an odd thing, and we don't want to get confused. So the way we avoid confusion is by understanding what the culinary terminology would say, what the botanical terminology would say, and not flip-flopping back and forth in your own definitions of what you're eating or what you're describing to others. You don't have to use culinary. I find that avoids all the confusion, but you can do it any way you want. But don't confuse people, or don't be confused in and of yourself. I find it just works better. The third part, to me, is a powerful distinction, and one that deserves a tremendous amount of attention. Hang on one second. Check my coat pocket. Deserves a lot of attention, and that is the idea of, is food medicine? Well, if air is medicine and sleep is medicine and clean water is medicine and people saying nice things to you is medicine, well, then maybe we could say food is medicine, but I don't tend to think of food as medicine I any more than air or these other things. I think food gives us something that we require, and it makes us, you know, it gives us the opportunity to either be growing to our full potential, growing towards our full potential, or not. In other words, it can dumb us down, but I don't think food makes you smart. Food doesn't make you smart. Food either gets in the way, dumbs you down, or it doesn't. And any more than, you know, fresh air is invigorating. Well, no, the fresh air isn't invigorating, but stale air really slows you down. So I don't think of food as medicine in and of itself, and that I eat this for this condition and I eat this for this condition. I eat fruits and vegetables for health. And I know that I know enough about nutrition to know, like, wow, you know, if you're really low in iron, you could eat certain foods that are high in iron. And maybe if you're just a little low, you could bring the levels back up. But if you seriously have an iron deficiency anemia, dealing with it strictly with food is A, probably too slow, and B, still a bit hit and miss. We got to see, why do you have this, and why do you have this iron deficiency anemia? Is it life-threatening? If it's life-threatening, eating a little bit more iron-rich food is not the way to get out of that problem. So I'm not thinking of food as medicine, really. But a lot of people will tell me that if they eat certain foods, they feel better, which opens up a door, a Pandora's box of issues, including if you're addicted to a certain thing and then you have that thing, you'll feel better than you did before, because that's, you've reinforced the addiction. So whether that thing is a drink or a cigarette or dairy products, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It could be salt, for that matter. If it's an addiction, I'm not eating out of addiction. I'm eating out of preferences. I like to differentiate, if you're hungry, you'll eat almost anything. But if you're addicted, and you say, oh, I'm really, really hungry. And I go, well, great, I've got some lettuce. And they go, no, I'm not hungry for lettuce. I'm hungry for chocolate. Do you have any chocolate? Well, that's not hungry. Right? That's craving. And craving is just a nice word for addiction. So we use hunger. We've perverted, if you will, the use of the word hunger to disguise addiction, sometimes saying craving instead, but or even using the word appetite. I've got no appetite for lettuce, but I've got plenty of appetite for chocolate. Sounds nicer than saying I'm addicted to chocolate, but in reality, and so if you're addicted to chocolate and then you have some chocolate, you feel the urge coming on, the need, the monkeys gnawing at your back. You have the substance, you feel better. If the substance has stimulants in it, and human beings, of almost all the creatures out there, we're the ultimate stimulant junkies. We love stimulation. You think of the movies that have been promoted as a 2-hour nonstop adrenaline rush. We love our stimulation in almost every form and every variety. And you think of the way food is presented in restaurants, it's very often, even the presentation, it sizzles, it pops, it snaps, it's colors, it's this, it's that. And I'm not eating my food for the entertainment value, although I appreciate the entertainment value. I'm eating my food to supply a basic need, like air, like water, like sleep, like friendship, So, but if the food contains stimulants, for instance, before an animal is killed, the surge of adrenaline that goes through that animal is profound. When you eat the animal's muscles, you're eating a huge dose of adrenaline. And you feel the dose of adrenaline and you feel a surge and you go, wow, I feel so much energy. Well, actually, no, you just feel adrenaline coursing through. There's going to be a drop that comes after it. That's a pretty serious stimulant. But even salt is a stimulant. It's so powerful. When I feel better after I eat, it's because I've satiated a need to raise my blood sugar levels. I've provided calories. It's a very calm satiation. It's not stimulated. It's not irritated. My heart rate didn't go up. I didn't start sweating like eating red peppers might do to you, or hot peppers, my chilies might do. My tongue isn't burning. I'm really not looking to provide medicine when I'm eating my food. I don't want irritants. I don't want stimulants. And of all the things I don't want, I definitely don't want drugs. Now, oddly enough, in the pursuit of drugs, the people who on the streets use the hardest drugs are often called junkies, and the foods the drug of choice, the heroin that they inject on the street, is often called junk, which I find fascinating that we had the nerve to call the most irritating, stimulating, non-nutritional, absolute garbage foods and call them junk, and that the commercials would tell us, bet you can't eat just one. That we're going to addict you to this stuff, and that ours is better than theirs. And for me to think, I have enough self-respect and enough self-regard that I'm not going to put junk into my system. And my hair on the back of my neck stands up when I start thinking the phraseology that we use, because perhaps the place we know it most with guitars and yoga. So with guitars, we can differentiate types of guitars. There's acoustic guitars and classical guitars and 6 and 12 string guitars and bass guitars and lead guitars and electric guitars and all kinds of guitars, and there's all kinds of yoga. We have flow and all the different kinds of yoga, Ashtanga, and we can name different kinds of yoga, and that name tells us what kind of yoga it is. But what happens if I call it last man standing full contact cage yoga? Is it yoga just because I put yoga in the name, or is last man standing full contact cage really a fight, right? Like, if I call it yoga, though, maybe it is. I don't think that it can possibly be food if we put the name junk in front of food. How can that still be? Food is stuff that nourishes us, that provides something important that we need to have, that nourishes not just with nutrients, but literally our spirit and our soul and our inner being. It's fulfilling and satisfying in all ways, not just a source of calorie. But when we think of just a source of calorie, we think of those empty calories, which is how you make junk food. We might as well think about empty nutrients. Is a vitamin A tablet that doesn't have any calories and doesn't have the other associated nutrients, is that an empty nutrient just as much as oil is an empty calorie or sugar is an empty calorie? Could there also be empty nutrients? And would any and all of those things be considered junk? Well, yeah, if you have sugar from a bag, it's considered junk, or white flour is considered junk. Oil, empty nutrients, lots of calories, considered junk. Can of protein powder, well, then why wouldn't a vitamin A tablet or a vitamin E capsule be considered equally as much an empty nutrient, hence junk? Food for thought, folks. I'm not saying, as I've already mentioned once, that there's not room for life-saving intervention in the case of life-threatening deficiencies. Always want to save a life, but then we want to look at what caused those deficiencies or what resulted in those deficiencies and make the appropriate adjustments so that they don't continue to accrue. But it's well worth considering. Is junk food an all or none proposition, or is it a continuum? If it's a continuum, which I believe most people would see, where on that continuum do you wish to eat? I wish to eat at the other end of the spectrum. I want to eat what we would consider to be health foods, which are fruits and vegetables, whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic, as opposed to junk or death foods, which would be the other end of the spectrum from health foods. So I'm certainly not going to intentionally put junk into my system or into that of anyone that I care for. And I'm not feeding anybody else, so it doesn't matter, but I wouldn't do it to anybody. And I hope you wouldn't either. This is our food for thought. This just gives us a chance to communicate appropriately as we talk to each other over the course of the coming weeks, as I present all of yet what is left to come. And I'd like to open up the stage to some questions.
Well, first I want to thank Dr. Graham to provide us with this valuable and thoughtful information. Definitely, throw your thinking to hopefully the right channels. And I'm getting hungry for raw foods now, Dr. Graham.
Well, cool.
Right food.
I did lose a few. If there were questions before 5:30, I lost them when my power went out for a moment.
Yes, so could you please, guys, whatever questions that you have,
If anybody
or
put
if they were
questions in
answered,
before 5:30,
Yeah.
Please reinstate them.
on.
But I see there's two questions here already. So how important is it, Robbie asks, how important is it to eat greens when eating only fruits and non-sweet fruits or the fruity vegetables? And that's a good question. It's a good question. I personally eat lots of salads. I have a salad almost every day. I would say every day, but that's really not true. Occasionally the fruit is so good that, I won't have a salad. But most days I find I'm a far better, even keel, happier guy and not overeating on calories. Although you can cut those calories, as you say, by eating cucumbers and tomatoes and whatnot. It's a mixed bag a little bit because I know for sure what works, and what works is fruits and vegetables. Whether you want to call your vegetables the culinary vegetable fruits and say, okay, yeah, but I eat okra, that counts as a vegetable, but it's still a fruit. And so I'm eating only fruits, but it feels like I'm eating celery when I eat okra. To me, I was just doing that yesterday, and eating okra is, to me, it feels like eating celery, but it's a piece of fruit that's so much like celery that it's silly. I don't like to go out on the deep end and say, this will work, this won't work. I do know what does work, is eating fruits and vegetables. I have not seen world-class athletes doing really well on only fruit and non-sweet fruit. I do know of people who have done really well, but they don't tend to have a huge calorie requirement. They don't tend to eat a lot. And so I can't tell you that I know. I've seen, is it absolutely essential that you must eat celery or lettuce or some kind of salad fixings in addition to the fruity vegetables? Maybe not. But I've not done that experiment. I can't step out on that and on that limb and recommend it. Certainly for my world-class performers, they want more sodium than they can find in non-sweet fruits. So they need that sodium for fully powerful muscular contractions. Different pineapples are different. There's a lot of different kinds of pineapples. Another question, does it, if your taste buds get irritated, you can make your tongue bleed from a pineapple, and it's not the only fruit that'll do that. I've made my tongue bleed from figs, but some figs don't bother me at all. It depends on the fig and the variety. Depends on the pineapple and the variety, and depends on the ripeness. Fully ripe pineapples, though, can still irritate you. Let's remember, it's a very strong acid. Depending on how you cut the pineapple, there is a proteolytic enzyme called papain, which means that it breaks down proteins, including your tongue. And it's near the surface of the skin of the pineapple. So if you're cutting relatively close to the skin and you're getting lots of papain, then you're basically digesting your mouth as you're eating the pineapple. There's got to be some limit for that to be able to happen. Are the calories the same? Good question. It depends how unripe we're talking about. Does unripe fruit have the same calories as fully ripe fruit? I would say, in a sense, the calories are there, but as mentioned, you don't have the enzymes to break down the oligosaccharides. So if you can't access the calories, then it's kind of like eating packing peanuts. There's calories in them, but you can't access. It's like swallowing a mushroom without chewing it. At the other end, a mushroom is going to come out unchanged. So undigested fruit, because you don't have the enzymes to digest it, it doesn't matter if the calories are there, it's what it gives you. What's the problem with eating too many calories with bananas and dates? Well, the problem is that too many calories are too many calories. And different people will react differently to too many calories. Some people will get sleepy because their blood sugar goes so high. Some people will have troubles with digesting more calories than they can handle. And so they'll end up with a lot of wind or food repeating on them, or other kinds of indigestion because they just exceeded their digestive capacity. Some people will hurt if you eat more food than they need. Pretty much anybody who consistently eats more calories than they need is going to gain weight, and that weight is going to be in the form of fat. If you're not looking to gain body fat, overeating on bananas and dates is problematic. I don't recommend a lot of dates. I'm not anti-date by any means, but I don't recommend a lot of dates on their own. I've never seen anybody succeed long-term where dates were their primary food. You just can't brush your teeth frequently enough and often enough, and you end up with food stuck to your teeth, and that's a surefire recipe for dental disaster. Do we lose nutrients when we freeze fruits and veggies? Sure, a teeny bit. It depends how you freeze them. It depends how long you freeze them. So there's a kind of a freezer that's known as a frost-free freezer. It's what most people have in their house. Well, the way a frost-free freezer works is that every few hours or a few times a day, the temperature inside the freezer goes up above freezing, and it melts all the frost, and then the temperature goes back down and refreezes. And what that does to the food inside your freezer is called freezer burn. Because once the food was frozen, the cells burst because the liquids, the water inside the food, expanded, and it bursts the cell wall of the food. And then when it freezes, it rises in temperature above freezing, it thaws a little bit and then freezes again, and nutrients were lost for sure, which is why they'll tell you, if you freeze food, it's going to get freezer burn after about a month in a typical freezer. But in a chest freezer, you could easily get 6 months to a year of that in that same food, because a chest freezer is not frost free, meaning once it's essentially a deep freeze. So in the same way that they took a woolly mammoth out of the glaciers and he was pretty much intact, you can freeze your bananas in a chest freezer and they'll keep 6 to 10 times longer. No problem. I have frozen bananas in Sedro-Woolley, Washington, where I run my Health and Fitness Week each year. Frozen bananas in October, and come back the following August and had those bananas and they were just fine in a chest freezer. Is there some nutrient loss from the oxidation? That's what freezer burn is an oxidative process. And yes, there is some oxidative damage. A bigger question maybe is, do we really care? Do we care about that minuscule nutrient diminishment when we're eating the most nutritious foods available? And my answer would be no, I don't really care. I'm not recommending that we live off of frozen food, but we certainly, if we're living off of frozen food, we're still getting more nutrition than anybody else on any other diet, by far and away. And so including such food, I don't think is well, as my mentor T.C. Fry used to say, there'll still be room in hygiene heaven for you. Let's see, what's this one? Would I guess? Would I guess what? Would I guess that nursing women, especially those who nurse multiple children for many, many years, would do better eating greens than just fruits and nuts? What nursing women have is higher requirements for calories, and the basic mineral that they're losing the most of is calcium. But even then, it's not that much calcium. Cow's milk has a lot of calcium. Human milk has a lot of magnesium, and so it's neither sodium nor calcium that's the big requirement. It's magnesium, and you get your magnesium in sufficient quantities eating just a normal fruit and vegetable diet. But a woman who's breastfeeding one child, maybe a 6-month-old child or something, or a year-old child who's starting to become a bit more active, is feeding her child close to 1,000 calories a day. So a woman who normally eats 2,000 calories a day, who's breastfeeding, needs at least 3,000 calories a day to hold her own. And that 50% increase in calories also gives her a 50% increase in all of the associated nutrients, so that she doesn't really have to worry about that. Why do people go on Banana Island? People go on Banana Island for a lot of reasons. I've differentiated 3 different kinds of Banana Island. One is an event that I run every so often out where I run my Health and Fitness Week, where you're supervised. We don't go on bananas only, but bananas are the mainstay of every meal. And it's a great experience for people. They learn a lot about themselves. They learn a lot about bananas. They get off of a lot of bad habits. Another kind of Banana Island would be one that you just put yourself on, where you say, you know what, for the sheer mental toughness, for the willpower that I intend to develop in myself, and the inner strength, I want to, or I'm not feeling right, something's wrong, I need to just clean up. I don't know what it is, but it's not bananas. So let me get off all the other stuff for a while and just make a nice habit of eating just bananas. There's that, and you could go on bananas for a while on your own for a bit. I also take people personally on a Banana Island program for a variety of reasons. But in that situation, I'm guiding them every single day with different purposes in mind, from what feedback I get from them about how much they eat and what they feel and what they miss, and what's going on with their blood sugar levels, and a lot of different reasons, including breaking some really nasty habits and getting back in touch with themselves and having a simple program to fall back on in the future should their eating ever get out of control, or they feel like it's out of control and they want to bring it back to something simple where you just go, okay, without going to the extreme of not eating at all, which doesn't really teach you much about eating. Instead, they can go to a very simple program, just saying, okay, let me just eat bananas for a few days, pretend that's all there is. But there's 3 very different programs that are all called Banana Island. Yeah, there are some raw food, sweet potatoes and pumpkins. But what they do is they include a little sweet potato or a little pumpkin in their diet. I have never seen a raw foodist just eat an entire sweet potato, certainly not a large one, and go, oh yeah, well, that was my meal. I just ate a sweet potato. That was fine. Or a pumpkin. Never seen anybody. I've seen people make a few noodles out of pumpkin and include it in a noodly meal, or as a garnish for a salad. A few pumpkin noodles look nice, and a few are edible. Heck, raw potato is edible. My father taught me when I was a little boy, but you didn't then eat an entire potato or a meal of 6 potatoes. You would just eat a bite of potato and go, yes, it is edible. Probably a bite of Sneaker is edible, but I wouldn't want to make a whole meal out of Sneakers. So if you want to eat a meal of sweet potatoes, be my guest, but I don't think it really will hit the desires that we're looking for most, which is sweet and juicy. Sweet and juicy is this is how we're trained by our taste buds. We're always looking for sweet and juicy. This is how our metabolism and our entire physiology is managed, by our ability to stay hydrated and keep our blood sugar level sweet and juicy. These are critical components of healthy eating. And yeah,